need to find a photo for you.
Hi everyone, this is Margaret Hershey at Home with Hershey's, and thank you for joining us today for our wellness chat. And we're so blessed, apart from my co-host Jess and Stacey from Connectable Life, we have got Kareen Fasaki, who's our guest speaker today, and we're so excited to have her on because she's talking about my favorite subject, which is food. As you know, at Hershey's, we cook food, we show food, we teach people how to eat their food, and I'm so taken on what the fuel you put into your body is what manifests into your life. So if you put the right stuff in, like with petrol, you put the right petrol in. If you've got a diesel car, you can't put petrol in, else it doesn't go. And it's exactly what it is with our bodies. And I always say we don't get a handbook when we start this life. This is what you do and this is what you don't do. We've got to work it out. And it's, the quicker you work it out, the better. I've been vegetarian my whole life and vegan for almost 4 years now. And I want to tell you, it has changed my life. I don't believe that I could work a 20-hour day, 7 days a week, and look the way I do if I did not have a vegan diet. It would be impossible. It gives you so much energy. You eliminate all the toxins out of your body, and you just feel amazing. And that's what I want you all to feel every day. But without further ado, I'm going to say hi to Jess and Stacey and ask Stacey to introduce Kareen. Come on in.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And Kareen, thank you for joining us and for sharing your wonderful knowledge with us today. Kareen is a registered dietitian, credentialed coach, and mentor. She combines evidence-based functional nutrition and lifestyle medicine with coaching to help clients to change their behavior towards reaching achievable goals with lasting solutions. She is passionate about helping people on their journey to live lighter, nourished lives in body, soul, and spirit, able to fulfill their purpose and potential. Her special interest in clinical nutrition is focused on weight management and disordered eating, nutrigenomics, digestive disorders, and autoimmune conditions. So thank you so much, Kareen. On to you.
Thank you so much, Stacey, and thank you for Margaret and Jess in terms of the opportunity to be able to chat with you here today. It's really a great privilege. So our topic for today is about exploring mindful eating and the benefits thereof, and then just talking a bit more about food as our fuel and actually how food can be our medicine, but then asking the question, do we actually allow it to be or not? So if we just consider the aspect of mindful eating, so we could define it, or we can describe it as maintaining an in the moment awareness of food and drink that you put into the body. But it actually observes being aware of how does the food make you feel. And all the signals and the senses, everything that you become aware of when you sit down to eat, or then maybe not. So mindfulness actually is about acknowledging and accepting all of the feelings, the thoughts, the bodily sensations you observe when you consume food, rather than judging what you're experiencing. But it's not only about food consumption, it's also about buying food, food preparation, how you serve it. All of that is part of being mindful about what you do. So for many of us, our lives are rushed and it's from one thing to the next. So for many people, mindfulness is something that they regard as, I don't have time for that. If I have to be mindful, I have to slow down, or, I have to take a step back, and that's not always possible. So we have a tendency of eating and being mindless in general. So if you consider, for example, you might be someone who rush out of the door, grab a cup of coffee along the way, stuff your face, if I can put it that way, with something that you've grabbed from wherever you bought your coffee, maybe eating in the car on your way to work, or sometimes it's that thing of you're consuming whatever you have available, or what is available from the canteen, or from the what are those things called that you buy from that stands like with unhealthy snacks or energy bars, or like those soft drink kind of things. So just grabbing what you have available. Sometimes if it's someone who's a mom, maybe doing the school run, it might be that you're ending up eating in your car on your way to, I don't know, the school, or maybe picking up a child, or waiting while they're at some school activity or something like that. For other people, it's that thing of you don't have time to take a break. So you're sitting in front of your computer at your desk in the office, and you're quickly having something while you're continuing with your work. Or often it's just that thing of sitting in front of the television, maybe eating while you're watching the television. Or it might be that you're a mom and your kids are in the kitchen and everything's happening all at once. So you kind of grab a bite without even realizing what you're munching on, but you just need to get something in your stomach. So that's how many of us tend to go through our lives. So we completely neglect being mindful and being aware of what we actually do put into our mouths. And I think it's worth considering that. So I do want to ask the question, you as the listener, what do you think? So not necessarily about the environment that you eat in. I want to ask the question, what prompts people to eat? So what is it that prompts you to eat? Is it maybe it's a meal time? Is it that you do feel hungry? Is it that you're sad? Is it that you're frustrated? Is it that you can't carry on, or you have to take a break, and then you go for whatever is available? So what is it that prompts people to you as a listener to eat or to put something in your mouth, whether it is something that you eat or drink?
Mine is definitely hunger.
Okay.
So when I'm hungry, I eat, and if I don't plan my meal, then I do tend to eat more rubbish than not. Okay. But I've actually had quite a yo-yo journey with food, and I'm sure I mustn't say most of us, but a lot of us have had a journey with food, and it hasn't always been a healthy journey with food. So as a child, my mum and dad are very healthy eaters. So I grew up fairly healthy, but I was put onto Ritalin at 8. And as a result, I didn't want to eat anything. So I went on a starvation diet. And to get me to eat, my parents just let me eat whatever I wanted. And as a result, I ate pretty bad food just to eat food. And that spiraled out of control. And at varsity, I'm very short. And at varsity, I was deemed as grossly obese. And grossly obese. And for my height, I'm like 158. And so as a result, I went on a food journey myself. But then a couple of years later, so I'd lost 25 kgs. And then a couple of years later, I was watching a TED Talk. And on the TED Talk, I came across a guy called Daniel Amen. And he is actually a psychiatrist by trade, but he does scans on the brain. And I became very interested in this because my child had a traumatic brain injury at the age of 2. And so obviously the healing of the brain was really powerful in my mind. And doing that, I was exposed to how powerful food is for your brain, and eating a clean, healthy, mindful diet is so incredibly important, not only for our weight and for our lives and our health, but also our brain health. And so that was an exciting journey for me to go down, because it made me research and want to be more mindful about the food our entire family eats,
Sure, yeah. It makes a huge difference.
I just also wanted to add on the mindful eating. I think it's so incredibly important. I mean, we were chatting just before we came on about how you don't know what you don't know. And a huge part of eating correctly is awareness and education as to what is good for you and your body and how it makes you feel. And just a little bit about my story is that I felt like I had constant migraines and constant sinus problems. But it just became a part of my life. It was just the way I felt. It became so normal to me. And then when we started the Connectable Life journey, I ended up seeing a functional medicine practitioner, and she suspected that I possibly had dairy insensitivity and a small gluten intolerance. So she made me cut the gluten and dairy out of my diet for 6 weeks. And I cannot explain the difference it made and how I felt. And I'm now at a point where if I have gluten or dairy, I feel the result of it straight away. And now I know that the headache is linked to that, and the sinus is linked to that, because I now have that awareness. So I'll still include it in my diet a little bit, but I know now, my body tells me when I've sort of had too much, whereas before I would just carry on with the migraine, carry on with the sinus. So that just that awareness of my body and what's good for me and not good for me has helped me feel so much better. So I think a huge part is taking the step and figuring out, you know, what's right for you, and then being mindful of that in your eating.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that dairy is no good for me. I had ice cream yesterday, which was my cheat day as a Sunday, 1 scoop of ice cream, and look at me coughing today. It makes a huge difference. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Corinne, you carry on.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's amazing to get everybody's feedback. I saw in the chat as well, so the various comments people made in terms of maybe eating because you're hungry, which is obviously a good thing. Eating because it's lunchtime. There's very many things to consider, but I think one of the key things, and like you have mentioned now, often when you change your diet, you actually become aware of how something that you might have been used to most of your life, all of a sudden, you realize, but it actually causes some damage. So if you I just want to touch on that. So maybe if you consider something like inflammation. So very often we have this underlying intolerance to certain foods, unaware that it's actually causing us problems, because that's how we've been eating all our lives. But then as you grow older, sometimes those little problems, it becomes bigger and bigger, and it becomes more of a challenge. And actually, without being aware that that's the problem, it causes other medical conditions, or just generally being unwell, or maybe just certain areas that doesn't. So for example, sinuses, which for one person can be no problem, and for the next can be a huge problem. So often then, if we start looking at the diet, then there's little things that we include in our diet that doesn't actually agree with us. And that then feeds into that inflammation in the body, which causes us to feel unwell in whatever the area might be. But sometimes it needs to take a step back and to start thinking about what you're doing, what you're eating, how you're feeling, and all of that. So before I go on too much about that, I want to just mention that being mindful is moving away from being strict, having a complete set of rules. That extreme structured way of eating that we often have, but it's more tuning into your body and to become aware of how do you feel, what do you need, what are the prompts that you follow when you engage with food, or when you consider putting something into your mouth. So sometimes also in terms of food intake, a lot of our impulse comes from us being, I want to say, unhealthy on the inside. So for example, we might be struggling with issues in our thought patterns, which causes anxiety or causes us to spiral in certain ways in how we think and then how we do. And then that impacts us to eat certain foods because we find comfort in that. I always use the example of something simple like drinking coffee, which for me is one of my challenges, because if I get stuck, then coffee is my go-to, unfortunately. And it's a constant thing that I must be aware of. What am I doing? How many coffees did I have? And it's all about making those choices, but being deliberate in the choices that we do make, and being aware of what is going on inside of me. So what do I need? How do I feel? All of those kind of things. So, sorry.
No, I was just saying, Virginie says, talk to us about intermittent fasting. And that's very fashionable at the moment. Everybody's doing intermittent fasting. Oh, I lasted 16 hours without food. I lasted 18 hours without food. I can last 5 minutes without food. But I did a full body scan, by the way, which was horrendous, but that's another story. And I couldn't eat for 2 days. Now, I never go more than half an hour without eating, because I eat little bits all the time, because I never know when I can get a gap. So, you see, even now I'm chomping all the time. That's just what I do. And I work with food, so I do eat a lot. But for 2 days, I could not eat anything before I went for this body scan. And you know that I was actually fine. But you know what I found out? I found out my awareness was so much brighter. I felt like I felt like a spaceman. I was aware of everything, and everything was just like in real life technicolor when I fasted. And normally my fasting is from when I go to sleep at night to when I wake up in the morning. That's as long as I fast. But tell us about intermittent fasting. Is it good for you or is it bad for you?
Margaret, to answer your question, it's not just straight yes and no. So it depends on the individual. So some people, for medical reasons, it's not always advisable to fast. For other people, and for most of us, I must say, so you have the one spectrum is people who are very scared to fast because they are they're dependent on their eating. So their eating is like a crutch, it's a comfort. So it's not actually about nourishing the body, it's about having something to fall back on. And for those people, often just the concept of having to fast or to go without food for maybe it's a few hours or maybe several hours, that for them there's a mental battle that you have to work through. But for most of us, fasting, whether you're doing it for a few hours or maybe like a longer fast overnight, like something like that, what you've mentioned now, or for some people, it would be a full day, or there's various methods of going about it. We talk about the 16-8, or well, you can do a full 24-hour fast. Some people will do several days of fasting. Some people will do a 14-hour, 10-hour. So what we are referring to then is you have a window where you can eat, which might be, if I use the 8-16 as an example, then you'll have an 8-hour window where you do consume food, and then you have a 16-hour window where you fast. And fasting then means that you can consume water specifically. Some people will still consume things like black coffee or like herbal teas in the fast, but it's good to teach your body to be reluctant or to use the water as your only intake in that time. But then in your eating window, that's when you will consume your food. So the benefits of that is tremendous. So in many scenarios, if we are referring to anything that relates to inflammation, that often has a very positive impact on that. But once again, I want to highlight, remember, I said it's not for everybody. So it's good to have a discussion with somebody who's knowledgeable about, maybe you've got some health conditions or something like that. So often there's things like that has an impact, or certain medications or stuff like that. But in general, it's a very, very good thing to do. So you mentioned about
do you do it for a long time, or do you do it just for one day, or do you do it every day? How do you know how long to do it for, the 16-8? I like the idea of it, and I like the idea that your body will go and sort itself out while you have the 16-hour fast. But I just get a bit nervous, like, is it good? And how many days do you do it for?
So, Margaret, I would say if someone is nervous about starting the fast, I would start with something that's a little bit more simpler. So I would work with something like a 12-hour fast. So, and a typical, what works well for many people is to say, okay, I'm going to have my 12-hour window of eating might end, say, maybe 7 o'clock tonight. That means from 7 o'clock tonight till 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'm going to be fasting. And a good practice to start with is to maybe do it for 2 days in a row, and then you have one break. And then you do it for 2 days in a row, and then you have one break. And then something that works very well for many people is to say, you do the fasting for 5 days of the week, and 2 days you have normal days. And the 2 normal days it's not about going off the rails and then, undoing everything that you've done. It's very much about becoming aware of, how did I experience the fast? What changed in my body? How does it impact, for example, food cravings? Or how do I feel in terms of the clarity of mind? Does it have an impact on how I sleep or how well I slept? So I always say it's important to, so that brings that mindfulness thing back, because it's good to start with becoming a bit more aware of what's happening with you, where are you? So before you engage in anything like that, consider, how do you feel? Do you have a clear mind? Do you sometimes struggle with brain fog? Do you, for example, just feel sluggish in general, not really feeling like going to do exercise? Or, sometimes we exercise in any case, but we don't really have the energy. It's like you're dragging yourself to go and do that. So to be aware of all of those kind of things. Also, in terms of your food intake, before you start doing something like that, so at that time to consider, what have I been doing in terms of what I've been putting in my mouth, and how does that make me feel? And then I encourage people to make notes on those things, because sometimes we forget how we felt beforehand and how things have changed after we've implemented something. And that little bit of awareness often helps us to understand, okay, but I felt like this before, now I feel like this. So maybe it's a good thing to try and continue doing it, or experiment with other ways of doing it. So if we use the fasting as an example, if someone's tried the 12-hour fast, then maybe next week try the 14-hour fast with a 10-hour eating window, and see how that goes for you. And then if you've done that for a few weeks, then move on to the 16-hour fasting period and the 8-hour eating window, and compare how did your experience of the different options differ, and use that then to decide, okay, so I've done this and then that happened, have done this and then that happened. And then you can, in that way, all of us know what we need, and we know how we could apply things. But in experimenting like that, you figure out what's working best for your body.
Yeah, now Osana says here, where was it? I saw it here. Who should one consult to determine your allergies, or even determine your intolerance for different foods? My husband's fanatical on all the stuff. He has blood tested, and then he has this tested, and he does this. He every Monday he starts a new diet. So he's done everything. He's done the blood diet, and he's done all the different other ones. But would we come to you to say, listen, what are my intolerances? I have no idea.
Yes, someone can come to me. So there's a simple finger prick test that we use, which is then sent away and analyzed, and that tells people about their food intolerances. And sometimes, and maybe if I can say from a dietetic angle, there's very many opinions about food intolerance testing. For me, considering it from a functional medicine perspective, I feel it's good to know those things, because you understand then what is it that doesn't work with my body for whatever reason. Remember, we're all different. All of us are unique in our ways. I mean, you can have twins and they might end up having different experiences from different things. So something like that is a very valuable test to consider in terms of what is it that doesn't work with my body and what not. The other option is you can go and do a elimination process, but it's very extensive and it's very lengthy and sometimes very frustrating for many people. So maybe not the best option. Can I just answer that? I saw someone ask a question about men versus women. In terms of Glenda Thompson asked the question. So normally what we find is in practice, I can tell you that I can confirm this, that typically women don't do that well with the 16-8 fast or intermittent fasting process compared to men. Men can manage very well in the 16-8. Women often do better on the 14-10. But that is the general perception in terms of research. So it can still be different from one person to another.
You're 14-10. Do you miss breakfast, or you can't miss supper because then you've got a really long time to go? So would you normally miss breakfast? You'd go, say, from 7 in the night right through to 9 the next morning, which means you've missed your breakfast, which is to me the most important meal of the day.
Yeah, I don't encourage people to miss the breakfast. So I would rather say, so I often would negotiate with an individual about, remember that in that we are also very different. So one person cannot go without the breakfast, another person can't go without the evening meal. So for that reason, and also depending on someone's workload. So if somebody is working as a greater demand on their brain, if they have a greater demand on their brain later in the day, then maybe it's more beneficial to skip your breakfast and maybe have a late breakfast, like a brunch kind of thing, and then you have a longer into the day eating period. Whereas if you are somebody who really can't function without your breakfast, then I would encourage some people to start with the breakfast, as then your eating window might start at something like 7 o'clock, for example, and then run to maybe 5 o'clock tonight, and then you start your 14 hours of fasting. It's in general for most of us, and we don't always know that in the beginning or when we start experimenting with it, but for most of us, we do better if we eat more earlier in the day, and maybe stop eating late afternoon, early evening.
Yeah, so tell us about the blood diet. Sandy wants to know about the blood diet. I know my husband's been on it, but I don't like people taking my blood, so I've never been on it. How much blood do you take? Do you prick your finger, or do you take intravenous? Do you draw it all out?
No, so with the blood diet, I don't use it myself, just because I have in the past I've had experiences where it doesn't always work for everybody. So it's one of those things. It's something that you can experiment with, and I'm pretty sure there will be people who disagree with me. So I know of people who have had a lot of success with the blood type diet, especially when it goes with live blood analysis, where they look into what's going on in your blood in terms of organisms and diseases and those kind of things. There I know that sometimes with that combined with food intolerances, people have had tremendous success with it. So typically it can be a blood prick, but it's something that you can go to any lab to and ask them, can they just tell you, can they just test you to do or to analyze your blood type? And then in that process, there's then recommendations for the different types of blood tests, and some of it is surrounding our body's reactions to certain components in the food. Some of it, so from my experience, it's not clear cut that it would make a difference to everybody. For me, something like doing a good comprehensive genetic test to tell you a little bit more about your genes, I find is more effective, because then you're targeting on a cellular level, for example, detoxification or oxidative stress or issues with inflammation. And you I always explain it as you work to there where the snow melts in the mountain, you're working towards that. So it's quite specific, but you can then very nicely address what's happening downstream and the symptoms and disease states that people suffer with.
Now, how do you detox your body? You know you've got certain toxins in the body, and I never forget, my friend asked me to go with her to Rustenburg Hydro, which is a fantastic spa, and I was so excited. Well, I got there, the detox knocked me. I used to drink in those days. I used to have wine, which that just knocked me, and I had the worst headache for the whole week. She was great, big, fat, and happy, and she was on the bicycle. She was cycling. She goes, I had this hectic headache from the detox. What's the easiest way to detox your body if you just found that you've got a few toxins floating around there?
I would say the easiest thing people can do is first of all to eliminate processed foods. So if you think of baked stuff and things that's got lots of different kinds of fats and different kinds of sugars and all sorts of E numbers, so that I would say is the starting point. So eliminate a few things, so the processed stuff, all of the unhealthy fats, so too much fat from oils and things that's been heated and all of that, different sugars. You can if you are somebody who usually consumes things like dairy and gluten and all of those, then I would say you can eliminate some of that as well. And then key is to introduce for a period of time a good amount of especially green leafy vegetables and things like so we call them the brassica, so stuff like broccoli and cauliflower and fruit from the cabbage family, because all of those, and especially if you consume them raw, they have components that contribute to support your body to detox. And on top of that, so the idea is you want to have a lot more of these raw, fresh foods. So decent amount of greens, decent amount of colorful other vegetables. So if you think of building a rainbow with your food, something like that. And then maybe considering eliminating your protein foods like your red meats or your heavier meats. So I would say sticking to maybe free range chicken and some of your healthier fish types. So just in terms of cleaning up your diet a little bit. So remember, there are processes that we follow to support the detox process in the body, but actually our bodies are made to handle the detox by itself. So just focusing a little bit on what you're eating, the food choices you're making, and then adding a good amount of healthy, clean water on a regular basis. You can add things like mint tea or ginger or warm water with lemon or lime, something like that. But in general, just cleaning up your diet is already a good starting point for supporting your detox processes in your body.
Now, as older women, we're eating all the broccoli and the cauliflower and the cabbage. It blows your stomach up. You end up with this bloated stomach, you know. And when you're especially like I work with the public all the time, you can't afford to have a bloated stomach. What can you do to get that bloating down?
Margaret, I would say it's once again that thing of experimenting a little bit. So one of the things is, so I wouldn't say exclude those foods, because very often it's about, so remember a lot of the different kind of vegetables and plant foods, some of them or most of them go through a process of fermentation in our digestive tract. And often it's because we don't eat enough plant foods in general. So our bodies don't know how to cope with the plant foods. So as you gradually increase the amount of plant foods, it becomes easier for your body to digest and manage the fermentation processes in the body, and you are more comfortable with the experience of the bloatedness. So that's one thing. The other thing is to experiment with cook versus raw. So it's interesting with something like broccoli, where often people would say, no, I can't eat that because it bloats me. If you start asking questions about that, you realize most people will cook the broccoli and they might add something. So whether you add something or not, it's interesting to see that often when people start going towards eating the broccoli raw, so maybe adding it into a salad and chopping it in very small pieces, it already helps with the digestive process, and it prevents the extreme amount of gas formation in the body. Another thing then is to consider the quantities. So you will know how much you are used to eating, and if you start adding on that to consider how does it make me feel if I add this much compared to maybe a little bit less, and then how do I adapt to going for a little bit more. I would say those are your starting points. So often people's automatic reaction is, no, I can't eat that. but then you're not actually, you're kind of feeding into the symptoms, but you're not actually addressing the core issues. Because if you start gradually increasing on your intake of vegetable consumption, especially of a variety of vegetable consumption, then you will find over time your body adapts, and your experience of the bloatedness changes, and your tolerance is also different.
Okay, now Dale says, Corrine, what's your opinion on juicing? Well, to me, that's the easiest way to get the things like the broccoli and the cauliflower and the cabbage and things, kale, spinach, things that I don't really, I do like broccoli and cauliflower, but I don't like kale, and I really don't like spinach that much. But that's how I can get them into my system, by juicing. It seems to. What do you think about that? Because my juicer spits out all the roughage, and I just have juice. So is it better to have a juicer where you use the roughage? And I always say I'm going to use it in a soup, and of course I never do. But I just have the juice. I'm a great one. I always put carrot and apple into everything because it just makes it taste better. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm a great supporter of juicing. I think it once again depends on the scenario. For most of us, we will greatly benefit if we can have a glass of fresh juice on a daily basis, even without the fiber pieces. So often where people have severe challenges with their digestive health, so for example, in situations where there's a lot of inflammation, it's great to use the juice because you're still getting all of those nourishing nutrients into your body, but then without the fiber. So if you are someone who falls back on a lot of juice per day, then I would say add some of the fiber back, because remember, the fiber is also very, very beneficial for our digestive health. But juicing in any scenario, I would say it's great if you can do that. I do find for some people, the time that goes with preparing the juice and often cleaning up the juicer afterwards. That is quite time consuming. So I find that that's often an excuse for people. But I think if you can get away with, if you can get past that, if you can maybe change how you plan doing it and the processes that you follow around that, if you can include those juices on a more frequent basis, it's great.
You know, I found that when I was fasting, I had so much time. I wasn't preparing food. I wasn't looking for food. I wasn't buying food. I had so much time in the 2 days that I fasted. It was absolutely incredible. And to me, apart from the detox headache, I felt incredible, what did I have to say? But now Joy says she struggles with constipation, and she was told that beetroot helps it, but she doesn't find that's working. I like beetroot. I like to eat beetroot. I don't like juice beetroot. But Joy, I want to tell you, my mother and my best friend both suffered with constipation their whole lives. When I got them off red meat, their constipation almost went away completely. So I think that, to me, red meat is the greatest constipator of all. And you know, if your gut's clear, you feel clear. As soon as your gut's got solid inside, you feel that horrible feeling. So I think, to me, to cut out red meat. Don't you think, Corinne? What do you think?
I agree on that. And I also would advise, I would say to Joy and to anybody else maybe suffering with constipation, to consider other things like your consumption of starchy food, for example. So in general, you want to consume more foods with more fibrous components, but typically things like breads and maybe too much stuff like pasta and all of those can be a hindrance, even if somebody's eating a lot of pap. That can be an addition to, remember, it's good, it's starchy foods, but it often blocks the movement in the bowel. So just in terms of something like the beetroot, so the beetroot is actually a great option, especially if you can consume the beetroot with its juice, if you've cooked it, or if you can manage the raw beetroot, then that's even better. But remember, with any addition of fibrous food, you always want to have more fluid. So sometimes people will add the fibrous food, but they won't add the fluid. So the fluid is just as important. And then maybe just something that I find is very valuable is little flaxseed. So flaxseed that you not ground it, or maybe that you buy pre-ground it, just whole flax seeds that you can buy in a bag from Dis-Chem or Food Lovers Market or wherever. If you use, maybe start with 2 teaspoons up to 2 tablespoons of flaxseed, and you put it in hot water in the evening or earlier in the day and consume later in the day, but you want that period where it soaks. Then it actually, you will see it becomes a little bit like jelly almost. So consuming that then with other foods is a really great way of supporting your digestive tract. And then also to consider, remember, okay, so something like beetroot is great, but think of your different kind of seeds and nuts if somebody's not intolerant, or, you know, just a variety of vegetables and different kinds and different colors of veggies. It's always a great addition just to support the digestive health.
I never knew you had to soak flax seeds, because I've always taken flax seed, but I hate to tell you, it goes in and out exactly the same. I don't think it touches sides down the way. So a lot of the time when you're eating those nuts and seeds and things, they just go in and out, and you think, did my body get any nutrition out of this? You know, so what do you think about eating? Do you soak all the seeds that you eat? But so I always buy the seed bread because I love seed bread, but sometimes you wonder if it touched sides on the way down.
Yeah, I think if it's processed like that, it's a little bit different. But I think in general, for things like seeds, even nuts or beans and pulses, it's a good idea to actually soak them before you start using them, because there's a component there that starts activating it. So it kind of starts breaking it down. So it makes it easier for the digestive process. But definitely in terms of seeds and things, so often what people will do is they will maybe put it in a coffee grinder and ground it. But then what happens is you only use a little bit, and then the rest people maybe leave in the fridge or something like that. And by the time you consume it again, you've lost all of that goodness. So if you've got a big family and you're adding lots of ground of whatever seed you're using, then maybe it's different. But if it's maybe just you and your husband, or it's maybe just one portion that you use, and often the better option would be to rather soak it, maybe for at least, I would say, for 4 hours before consumption.
Now, Akram says here, is there a certain fast for certain age group? What diet would you recommend for the 35 to 40-year-old? So, obviously, I mean, my body is completely different from a 35 to 40-year-old body. So I'm still battling to get around the 12-hour fast, but I'm aiming at 14-hour, I think. So when she's 35 to 40, I mean, it's hectic. You've got kids, you're running around, you've got a husband to get going, and every day. What fast would you suggest there? Start with a 12-hour and work from there?
Yeah, I would say start with a 12-hour and maybe do 1 day of fasting and have a normal day. So instead of doing 2 days of fasting and then rather have just 1 day and then a normal day to evaluate your experience. How did you feel? How did you sleep? And then build it up to more days in a row. And then something else that I think is very important, actually for any one of us, is in terms of the fasting, is sit down and think about it. Because we have all of these fears that goes around in our heads. And unless you start asking questions about what you are thinking and experiencing, it remains in your subconscious mind. So unless you start asking into that, it kind of remains, I want to say, hidden. But actually then so even if you have a hectic, busy day, if you sat down and you gave it some thought and considered maybe how the day might be, or so if we specifically with regards to the fasting, if you consider that maybe you're going to have a 12-hour window of eating, that means maybe initially your aim will be to fit in the same amount of food as you normally have. But then you need to plan on, what am I going to have for breakfast? What am I going to have? Or I don't necessarily want to go to the structured meals, but consider what would your food intake be, and to pre-prep that, so that if your day is busy and hectic, then at least you have got some idea and you've already prepped something that you're going to have. So the food preparation or pre-planning often feels like a mountain for many people, because it's another thing that they have to fit in, or it's something else that you have to consider. But I promise you, once you've done that little bit of planning and maybe have put a few things together and okay, that's ready, that's available there, I don't have to take extra time to figure it out, that already saves a bit of time in that day where it might be busy and hectic. And remember, there's a lot of truth. If you don't plan, or
you plan to fail.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was aiming at. So it's a real lot of value in that planning. And I also want to add, with regards to that, it's good to also plan for your failure. So often we have the aim of doing things in a certain way, and then if we fail to do that, then we kind of punish ourselves and throw a whole lot of guilt and accusations and things towards ourselves. Whereas if you actually sit down and think about it and realize, okay, there is a chance that I might fail, then you can prepare for that. And then if you did fail, then okay, that's fine, I failed, accept it, move on, and tomorrow you try again. Try not to fail twice in a row, but prepare for that as well.
So would you, when somebody comes to you, do you sit them down and say, okay, what do you eat? And then I suggest this is what you take out of what you have to eat. This is what you can eat. This is what you can't eat. Do you put a whole meal plan together for them, or how do you work it?
I'm not very keen on meal plans, but I do sometimes do that. My ideal is if I can work with someone where I can sit down with them and have a look at what they are doing at the moment, and then kind of work with them and asking into what they think they could or should change. Because very often we already have an underlying idea of what we should be doing. And my philosophy is always that the client or the patient knows best. So they actually already have the answers. Sometimes they just need maybe a little bit of guidance, or they have the answers, but they feel unsure about that. So to then clarify that. So it's different if I work with someone in an acute, with an acute illness or something like that, because sometimes then they need more guidance. But in general, the idea is to work with the client as they I don't want to call it a meal plan, but their food intake is like a working document. So it's like something that grows. And sometimes you have to experiment with something and then afterwards realize, okay, no, that and that didn't work for me. So how am I going to change it? What else will I go to? How can I do it differently? Yeah, so I do often do meal plans, but I don't do meal plans just as a handout to say, okay, this is what you're supposed to do. It normally goes with the client having to do some work on their part to become aware of what are they doing, how are they feeling, how are they responding to what they have been doing, and maybe to certain things that I suggest that we kind of in agreement, in agreed manner work towards. So I would say if I do a meal plan, often it's more about teaching the person about, you know, healthy eating in general. What can that look like? What are different options? Sometimes people have no idea. So I would say it's more in that sense, but actually the ideal is that, you know, that I work with a client and how support them as they figure out what they want to eat, how it could look like, etc.
Now, Jess, Sandy wants about your journey, Jess. She says, Jess, tell us about your journey with food.
Yeah, I think I mentioned briefly earlier that I had these constant migraines and sinus, and yeah, it turned out to be that when I cut out the gluten and dairy, it helped me tremendously. I'm not sure if she's referring to that, but I also just wanted to mention, Corinne, in terms of the planning, I personally find that you know, not like a strict meal plan, this is what you can have, this is what you can't have, but just an idea of what the week looks like really helps me in terms of my shopping. Because if I don't know what the week looks like, I ended up putting everything and anything into that trolley, and it's normally the wrong things. So I do really find that sitting down and planning out the week in terms of what meals, doesn't have to be Monday lunch, Friday dinner, but just a general, these lunches, these dinners, helps with the shopping list, and then avoids, you know, all those unnecessary things, because then you just start chucking. And try not to shop if you're hungry or tired, because then everything looks amazing. So I think in terms of a shopping list for me really helps, especially now with Checkers 60, where you can only buy exactly what you need rather than walking through all these beautiful aisles and just throwing all the convenient stuff in.
That's my shopping down from 3,300 Rand when I buy exactly what I need.
Wow.
Yeah, especially because you can only have 30 things. So you're like, okay, what are the 30 things I really need? And so it really helps.
That's a goodie.
Stacey, tell us about your going from 70 kgs down to 45. I mean, that's unbelievable.
So a lot of people have actually asked me on private messages already. So I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little video today and I'll put it up on our socials. So if you're not following Connectable Life, please will you follow Connectable Life, and then you will get a full rundown, because I have a absolute love of unhealthy food. And I want to eat only processed food. It's very hard for me to eat the healthy options, but it's something that I've had to force myself. And it's not fun for me either. You know, when I'm eating the healthy food, I'm not thinking to myself, oh, this is so delicious, I'm loving this. I actually have to like train myself and be like, Stacey, you have to eat this good food if you want to live a long, healthy life. And you know what? Since I've been doing this, I can't tell you that my mental health has completely changed. My energy has completely changed. But not only that, my attention span, my brain has changed. Everything in my life has only been better. So I say it to you, I know it's not easy, but it is definitely worth taking that leap and doing it. And also like walking alongside people who encourage you to do it, you know, to do it as a family, to do it with somebody that's going to keep you accountable is really powerful as well. So I'll be sharing that on our socials a bit later. But I did want to mention, Karine, I wanted your opinion on this. I read an article a couple of weeks ago about microgreens and micro herbs, that they are packed with far more nutrients and a lot of value. And, you get them in everything now. You can get, the broccoli sprouts, the cabbage sprouts, the you name it sprouts. And so I've been buying those, and I'm actually going to start growing my own because my kids eat it so much better. It doesn't have a very strong flavor and taste. So I find I can just pack it into everything, literally on, in their smoothies, in their breakfast, well, not quite breakfast, unless they're having scrambled egg, but in whatever meals mainly that we're having, and they just happily will eat it. What are your thoughts on the macros?
Yes, I agree with you. It does appear from food testing that there is a lot more of specific nutrients in the microgreens. So it's a really good way of, especially like you mentioned with regards to taste, or some vegetables are just, with their strong flavors, especially with younger children, they just don't like them. So it's great then if you can add more of the microgreens, and especially if you can grow them at home, and they can be fresh picked and added to vegetables and things. I just want to use an example of it. For example, there's a component in broccoli sprouts that has got a tremendous impact on some of the cellular processes in our body that impact on, for example, detoxification. Not only that, but especially detoxification. And it's amazing that when they produce the supplements, the content comes from the sprouts, because they are so much more loaded with an active ingredient, as opposed to normally full-grown broccoli that we would consume. So for various vegetables, and it is nice, it's like you say, we do now get a whole range of different types of microgreens. So it's definitely a great way of adding vegetables, and especially in terms of topping up on the nutrient levels.
Corinne, can I jump in and ask you a question before we run out of time? For those who want to, improve their lives, improve their diets, and, start with the sort of basics, we always hear the term a balanced diet, just eat a balanced diet, a balanced diet. What does a balanced diet look like in 2022? I mean, I think there's so much more research these days. I remember at school you had a plate and half of it was this and a quarter, and you had to draw the plate. But now that we know so much more, what does a balanced diet look like for the very generic general person? Obviously there's exceptions.
Okay, in my opinion, a balanced diet looks a little bit different from what we are normally advocating. So if I want to use the example of a hand, because maybe that's easy for people to remember, but if you think of your hand, then first of all, you want to include sufficient fluid intake, and that fluid intake should be predominantly water intake, good clean water, not so much coffee or juice or sodas. You want to exclude all of those things that's actually drinking calories. You don't want those kind of things, because often they add all of the unhealthy stuff as well. So lots of good clean water, and then you can top that up with maybe a good cup of coffee or a green tea or something like that. Then before I move on to the rest of the hand, if you think of the base of your hand, I always say to people, think of that as the greens, your base of vegetables, which ideally you want of at least a half of your food intake. I would say should be vegetables. So that means if somebody is consuming oats or muesli or something like that for breakfast, it means you need to make up for that vegetable consumption with your other meals. Okay, so half of your intake you want to have as good green, at least a base of green vegetables. Like I said before, leafy greens, but also your cauliflower, cabbage, those kind of things, onions, garlic, all of those adding flavorful things. Then on top of that, you want to add variety, and you want to have good amount of different colors. So think of that rainbow concept. Then the second thing if you're on this finger, I would consider protein, and that looks different from one person to another. So for someone, it might be more plant-based proteins. For another person, it would be a bit of fish, a bit of chicken, a bit of red meat, in moderation. Okay, but definitely if you consider your proteins, also consider things like more from your plant base, so legumes, nuts, seeds, different kind of grains like quinoa or hemp, all of them add some protein content. Then your carbohydrates. So with the carbs, people often go for the overly processed, overly refined kind of things. Choose more fibrous stuff, so less processed, unrefined. Okay, so for example, go for steel cut oats or rolled oats as opposed to the normal oats. Buy brown rice, or whatever the situation is, go for the more fibrous options. Then this finger, I would say, so someone has said potatoes. Yes, that's also a carbohydrate. Remember, it is one of your starchy carbs, but it's still a good option in moderation. Then your fats, I would say, for this finger, and there I want to say limit your animal fats. So there's lots of arguments that have been going around in terms of social media and all of those kind of things over the years. But for most of us, if we look at the genetic angles, for most of us, the animal fats don't do us any good. Okay, so rather go for more of your plant fats. Definitely olive oil, avocados, again, the seeds, the different kind of nuts, all of those provide valuable, healthy fats to our body, and we need that, okay? It's not a no-no, it's something that we definitely need. Okay, and then the fifth finger, the last one, I would say, consider variety, consider color, consider eating seasonal stuff. Okay, so there I have to make the comment, some shops will import stuff from all over the world, and in the end we have got no idea what is seasonal for us at the moment or for the area that we live in. Okay, so it's important to consider what is seasonal for South Africa at the moment, because seasonal foods have got a lot more nutrients, and they in terms of nourishment, they do us a lot better. So yeah, that would be my recommendation.
But now just a quick wrap up, because just one more question before we start wrapping up, is that the vitamin B12 injection. Now, being vegan, I have it because I'm just worried that I need it, and I just go once a month. I go to Discam and $60, have your vitamin B12. I come out feeling amazing, and I don't know whether it works or it doesn't, but it makes me feel good. So what do you feel about having a vitamin B12? And let's talk about other supplements quickly.
Okay, I want to say on that, so specifically, Margaret, for you that being a vegan, so sometimes it's good to test the B12 first, but I mean, if you know that you're getting it and it does you good, then continue it with it. My opinion on supplements is too much supplements can also do you harm. Remember, there's not that aspect of just drink a multivitamin, your body will use what it needs and the rest will be urinated out. It's not like that. Our body responds to everything we put into our mouths. So it's a better way. The better way would be to gain an understanding of what really is it that I need, and to supplement according to that. And sometimes for that you do need a health professional to guide you on that. I use the genetic testing for that, because then I know specifically what is it that somebody needs. A lot of things also, it's worth testing it before you just drink a whole lot of supplements. Your key thing is start with food. Your foods are good and nourishing, especially if you buy fresh and you buy whole foods.
Yeah. Absolutely. So now, Jess, a quick wrap up from you. That was an interesting one. Sandy wants to have, she wants one a week now. She wants to talk about food every week. And I mean, we're eating food every day. You'd think we'd spend more time on it. But Jess, a quick wrap up from you about food and nutrition and what you're feeling.
Yeah, I think we could go on for another hour. I think there's so much out there in terms of food and nutrition these days that it actually becomes a little bit overwhelming. So my advice would be to have one person in your life that you can go to with all your questions and your concerns, and follow that guidance, because you can pretty much find an argument for anything on the internet. So it does become quite scary. So that's exactly what I did with my journey. I figured out what my body was lacking, what it needed, and just started becoming mindful of that. And it really does, it's a game changer. It's so simple, yet so effective, because now I know how food affects my body, and in affecting my body, it affects my mind as well. So yeah, basically just do the research on yourself, figure out what works for you, and then be mindful of that. And thank you, Corinne.
Thank you. And Stacey, your wrap up. And
yeah, mine's exactly the same as Jess. I don't have any more to add.
Okay. And Corinne, a wrap up from you?
Yeah, just to say thank you for the opportunity. And then please just remember, what you put in your mouth can actually be healing. It can contribute to life and wellness and energy and good brain function. So that's key.
Okay. And Stacey, I was typing to you, but I couldn't type fast enough. Who's on next week for us?
So next week we've got Sandra. She was one of the Miss South Africa finalists, and she is going to be talking to us about resilience.
Oh, wow. Yeah, resilience, just keeping going no matter what. And I think
exactly
the whole thing. So please, thank you so much. Our plate is on Studios 8, but thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Corinne, for your amazing expertise and all the knowledge that you've got about food and how it affects us. And everybody join us next week and talk to Sandy about resilience, and just make sure that we are resilient people, and we've got to get out there. Those of you whose questions we didn't get around to answering, I'm going to send them to Corinne and ask her to answer them with you one-on-one during the week. And if you want to get hold of Corinne, her details are there. Please go there. You owe it to yourself to eat properly. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. We'll see you next Monday. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Corinne. Thanks, Margaret. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, everybody. Thanks, Margaret.